Let's now take a look at what a runtime integration would look like. So here's an example of one possible way of implementing a runtime integration. Once again, we might have an engineering team that develops the products list application. They would eventually decide that it's time to deploy their application. And at that point, rather than deploying their project to, say, NPM or something like that, they would bundle up their project and deploy it to some static URL, something like, say, myapp.com/productslist.js. So this JavaScript file right here has all the source code for the products list application. So then whenever a user navigates to, say, myapp.com, we would load up the container app. And at that point in time, the container app would then fetch that productslist.javascript file or .js file and execute it. So notice that in this approach, the container only gets access to the source code of products list after the container has been loaded into the browser. Now, this approach has upsides and downsides as well. So with the runtime integration, the big upside is that we can independently deploy the product list application at any time without having to redeploy the container. That's definitely a big upside. Another big upside is that we can easily have different live versions of the products list application. So we might be doing some kind of A/B testing where we have two versions of the products list. And it can be up to the container to decide which of those two versions to use. The downside to this approach is that the tooling and the setup for it is way, way more complicated. And there's really a lot more going on here that you have to understand as an engineer. Now, having said all this, and having kind of compared a runtime integration versus a build time integration, in this course, you and I are going to be focused 100% on a runtime integration. And we're going to implement it using Webpack Module Federation. The reason that we're covering this inside this course is that it is definitely the hardest thing to set up and to understand. And so in my opinion, it makes it way more sensible to cover this inside of a course where I can essentially walk you through everything piece by piece and help you really understand what is going on. Now, let me be clear. You might be saying, hey, Steven, I don't want to do the hardest thing here as I'm just getting started. Don't worry. When I say hardest to set up, I just kind of mean relatively. It's not going to be ridiculously hard. I just want you to be aware that we're going to be doing this approach because it just makes a little bit more sense to cover it in a course where you can have a lot of kind of guided instruction as you go through. The real reason that we're using this approach is that it's definitely the most flexible and performant solution for doing integration right now. One of the big downsides, however, is that we're going to have to spend a lot of time around Webpack and really understanding what Webpack is doing for us and how it works. If you don't know anything about Webpack right now, that's totally fine. I'll give you a really good overview in the coming videos. Okay, so now we've got a better idea of what's going on. Let's start to tackle our e-commerce application in the next video.